Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Thanks to TriBooth, the best vocal booth for home or on-the-road voice recording. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, learner!
Here we go.
And welcome to another Pro Audio Suite, thanks to Austrian Audio, making passion heard, and TriBooth. Don't forget the code PAP200 to get your $200 off. This week is another one looking at the transition from PC to Mac at my place, which I thought was going to be really easy, but it appears I was incorrect. I did play something it's actually on Source Connect with Robbo a couple of days ago, and he heard the whole thing just crash and crackle. We're not quite sure what's going on, whether it's the ID44 or Wavelab not liking the M1 chip or whatever. We're still trying to get to the bottom of that. But yeah, it's been horrific to say the least.
So you're on the Audient ID44 Mark II, correct?
That's correct, which I'm not using now because I don't trust it.
Mm-hmm.
But you are on the Mac.
Now right.
Are you on this Mac right now, or is this your laptop?
No, I'm on the laptop, which is also a Mac, but the laptop. No, it kicked off with, I fired the Mac up thinking it should be pretty straightforward because I had all the gear here. So I thought, this will be easy. That kind of went wrong where I had to get Mac support, which I did, and they were very good, I have to say. It was a nice lady from Texas somewhere.
What was the issue on that?
We had to basically strip the whole thing down because it wasn't talking to anything. It was kind of, look, it's been so many things, I can't remember what that one was now. But anyway,
it was a password issue.
It was a password, wasn't it? Yeah.
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 Did you start by migrating your system from the old to the new Mac?
No, he had a PC.
Okay, good. That's usually a bad idea.
He migrated the PC into the Mac, and that's what fucked it up.
No, I didn't do that either. No, it was, and that's when I spoke to you, Robbo, wasn't it? Yeah. When I was having that issue.
So to be fair, I suppose to be fair, I think there was an issue with setting up your Apple ID, which I'm not sure that the Mac liked too much. It kept wanting passwords and things that weren't in a keychain that should have been and stuff like that. And I think that was part of the reason.
Yeah. So, and also I was trying to install Wavelab, and that was where we had the Apple ID issue. And then we had another password issue that just wouldn't accept passwords that I know were correct, but it just wouldn't acknowledge those passwords. So basically, and that was when Robbo said, well, look, why don't we just change the password of the Apple ID? So we did. And then my laptop decided all my email accounts were offline.
Yeah, which is another keychain issue because we logged out of your laptop before and then changed the password. So then when you logged back in, it wanted to create a new chain because there was a new password and you hadn't changed it on that machine. That's right. So, So, and that still hasn't been resolved. I've got one email account back up. The other ones, it just would not see any of the passwords. The email addresses are all weirdly corrupted and it's very strange.
So you're using Apple Mail? The Mail app on the Mac?
What do I use? I just use Mail,
that's one of your problems, right?
Yeah, well, it appears that is probably a problem that needs to be solved. So we're sort of halfway through.
I have to tell you, man, I mean, I've been using Mac since 2006 or so, thereabouts. And what I've kind of learned over the years was the Apple architecture ecosystem is excellent for some things and other things just a total headache.
Yeah.
And I found that Apple Mail is one of those headaches. I just get so tired of seeing those errors saying can't connect to server errors and
correct.
And just the myriad problems there. And, while it is probably a more private way to go in terms of, email versus Google,
Yeah.
which is what I use. I really do prefer my mail in the cloud, on a web server and not using SMTP and all the other servers that, a mail client has to use to reach your different email accounts. It is irritating. Oh boy, is it irritating.
Yeah.
And then passwords on Apple, because the systems now are many layers of security and privacy that didn't exist 10 years ago. There's just so many more hoops to jump through, to authorize this and allow this to run. And I feel your pain. It is nowhere near as painless as it was 10 years ago.
I couldn't believe how difficult just reconnecting the keychain on his MacBook is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you needed a bit of a programming degree to act, because I was reading through it and I said to AP, look, I'm actually going to stay away from this because I don't want to give you a bum steer.
Yeah.
Something that should be so simple to just go, hey, this is the keychain I'm on. Here's the keychain. Because we could see the keychain I needed to connect to, but the process of getting it there was a nightmare.
Yeah. And then you couldn't even wind the clock back. That was the other thing. It's like, can't we just wind this laptop back before we change the password? But obviously you can't do that either.
Yeah.
So
it's psycho levels of security.
Yeah.
And this is
the Linux and Unix kind of type of stuff
right. It's based on Unix, and every single file has a permissions level access attached to it. And if one of those files has a corrupted permission or it's not right, stuff just starts getting weird.
Yeah. Well, talk about weird. This is even weirder. So going back to the new Mac Mini, I started getting like a digital clip in the audio. It just come from nowhere. And I was talking to Robbo on Source Connect, and we were just chat and everything. And all of a sudden the thing just went off the Richter scale. And it was just like this really nasty digital, how would you
just
describe
distortion.
it?
Yeah, it sounded like a distortion. It was awful.
Like it went right to zero and just went.
It just
was clipping at zero.
It was a different thing, but the whole thing just went. It just it didn't just clip. It just went nuts and just stayed there.
It sounded like a dodgy mic cable. If you had a mic cable that was a leg was a bit loose and you shook it. It was like that, but like amplified.
And you had phantom power going through it.
Yeah. Amplified like 10 times. It was just awful.
Let me ask you this. Would you hear that in your monitor, in your zero latency monitor off the ID44, or would you only hear that on Source Connect or on your playback?
No, it's actually coming out the ID44, and it was recorded. Yeah.
It was input.
Yeah.
Oh, the input side. Yep. See, then that's a whole different animal.
Yeah. So it's the input, and this is where we're kind of stuck, whether it is... Well, it's definitely the input because it's getting inside the ID44 and then hitting.
Yeah, if your headphones are plugged into the ID44 and you hear an obnoxious blast of noise, which is what you're basically describing, at your headphones, that's happening at the firmware level of the device, right?
Correct.
That's happening internally.
Is that low latency monitor analog or is
no,
it
it's
digital?
firmware. It's firmware.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a hardware mix knob. Like on my Portcaster here, I have a physical mixed balance knob, and I can literally mix to me, back to you.
Yeah.
But in an Audio ID44, because it's a much more complex monitor monitoring section, you can set up monitor mixes for different headphones, for your monitors and et cetera. So, and the firmware is what sounds like it's biting you in the butt.
Yeah.
And
or it's like something crappy about the USB connection, and it's literally just like some sort of, because USB can kind of create these like clocking.
Yeah, but it's I don't know, because I changed, because when I first got it going, I didn't realize it didn't have enough USB-C ports, so I ran the USB-C to USB-A into the computer. Then I got an extension, then ran the USB-C to USB-C. So it's not a cable issue for a kickoff. That's one thing I do know.
Is the audio connected directly to the computer, or is it going through some other piece?
Straight to the computer. So then this other weird thing happened yesterday. So I've gone in, I've set my levels on the mixer, which comes, on the screen from the ID44. Open up Wavelab, hit record, did a session, came back in here, went to listen back to the session, and the screen is blank. It's like it didn't capture any audio. It did that to me this morning as well. And I'm thinking, this is totally whacked out. So I'd actually grabbed a free Twisted Wave, just a trial version of Twisted Wave, chucked that on and did the same thing. It worked. So I used Twisted Wave this morning for a session. I had 2 sessions to do. As I was editing, every time because I usually grab some room noise, just copy a section that I can drop in where there's like a breath or I need to space things out or whatever. Every time I dropped something in, we'd get this like, that ping pong sound, when you're hitting the mouse and it's you
like an error sound.
It's like bing, 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 that kind of noise. So I'm thinking, what the? And I'm not touching anything. And it's just going crazy. But I haven't had that since I then opened up a new file as a WAV file and it's mono, and I didn't get that happen when I was doing the edit.
So you're probably trying to paste stereo into mono or mono into stereo, and it's like not allowed.
Probably, something weird. Yeah, it allowed me to do it, but it was kind of weird.
How different is WaveLab than Twisted Wave?
I'm just used to WaveLab, and the new one's got a few other bits and bobs that are kind of handy, which I haven't even got to yet. But I just used to using WaveLab. I'm used to the way the screen looks, and I just find it easier.
So you're on a new Mac. It's Silicon, so it's the new M1 processor architecture. So undoubtedly, if you're not using some brand new version of WaveLab, then it's running in what's called Rosetta mode. It's
a brand new WaveLab. It's 11.1.
It still could be running in Rosetta mode.
It might still be. See, Steinberg is very much PC first in my experience. They're kind of always been a PC-based company. Nuendo was PC when Pro Tools was on Mac, and they just always been PC first. So I'm wondering if the WaveLab for Mac is a little bit behind the development, schedule than maybe other companies. Like Twisted Wave is all about Mac, so they've always been kind of in lockstep. But maybe WaveLab is a little bit behind, and so maybe that's part of the equation.
Yeah, it could be. This is like we're digging to try and find what is the issue, because then what happened after that? So I did that session, then I had to go out for a while. I came back, and then I got on with Richie, who's the tech guy that we've had on the show before with Alistair Lee.
Is that when I showed up?
That was when you showed up. Yes, that's right. You showed up. Yeah. So I was talking to him then, but I spoke to him this morning because I thought we'd just jump on quickly before we did the podcast. And I told him what had happened, where I was trying to record on WaveLab and ended up with blank files. So he quickly jumped on, and then I don't know what he touched. He said he didn't touch anything, and we opened up a file and started recording, and it worked. And we didn't get any clipping. The file levels were perfect. It's
the
bizarre.
ID 144 is working, or is it 44 or 144?
It's the ID 44 Mark II. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that happened, I just sent him a text actually while we were doing the show, and I said to him just before we got on, I was trying to do a playback, and I could hear it through the headphones. That was fine, but it wouldn't come through the monitors. So I'm like, what the hell is going on with this thing? Like the DAW faders up. Everything is
now that's firmware. Now you're talking about a firmware problem.
Yeah, and I
ID44.
Yeah. So I'm thinking it is all the issues we're having are coming from that ID44.
It sounds like it.
So if you connect your SSL to it and it all works perfectly, then there you go.
And I would
if you go to a device that's native, that's USB class compliant, the SSL2 is one of those.
Yep.
Right. Plug and play, no drivers. You're going to have a much better experience. Sounds like you're going to lose out on some of the routing, but you'll have an easier time operating it for now. It's really unfortunate. Audient, I think, is brilliant at hardware and not so brilliant at software and firmware. Like that's just kind of the impression I've gotten.
Yeah, we've seen some unique issues with, but they all have their thing, at least the ones that make drivers. I mean, we've got a trouble ticket where someone was using our LTC program. Everything's great. He plugged in a Mo2 interface that I believe is actually class compliant because it's an M2 interface. And
I think so.
Yeah, and now the software is crashing. It's like trying to figure that out.
Wow.
Really? Okay.
or I mean, you know how like Apollo interfaces just don't like Chrome, or there's always like little kind of tweaky things. But usually you're right. The class compliance stuff is just so much simpler that there's less to get messed up, and they typically don't. Like,
you probably have a bad taste in your mouth at this point for Audient. They do have another product line that's actually considered supposedly notched down, but it's called the Evo series.
Yeah, I know the Evos. Yeah.
And they have an Evo 16 that would give you plenty of I/O. And so it's based on an entirely new architecture. It's really internally in every way different from what you have. I wouldn't recommend it I wouldn't just say go try it, because I would want to talk to some users, that have used them for more than a month, but that I have not heard nearly as many complaints about issues with the newer Evo stuff as I have.
Well, it's interesting because
ID stuff.
We looked at a couple of alternatives, because originally I was going to go with the RME Fireface, the UCX2, I think it is. But they're really exy, and so I thought, and then I saw this ID44. I saw a couple of things, and I checked them out, and I watched Julian Krauss actually, and I actually got through the whole thing, which was pretty good for me. But he's interesting character, very intelligent. So his opinion at the end of it was that he rated this in top 5 interfaces
on a sonic level, from the sonic side.
Yeah, on sonic.
In other words, like just great sound.
Yeah, and he rated the whole thing. So I don't know, and that was the thing that swayed my opinion, because I know that guy. I've seen him do other stuff, and he's highly respected. So I based that on his review.
Sure, of course.
But it seems I may have, I don't know.
How much do you need? So in terms of your actual needs, how much do you need a sort of complicated console firmware controlled mixer versus how much do you need just really good 4 AD/DA converters, analog in to analog, in and out?
Well, the thing is, because I've got the different preamps, which are,
right.
I love them, so I want to use them, and that was the whole idea. Right. This was a converter where I could run my analog preamps through a converter to the Mac.
Well, let me ask you this: how many times do you use more than one analog input channel simultaneously?
I would use maybe 2 simultaneously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because another alternative, I don't want to rewire your studio, but I just want to throw this out there. There's a company called Radial, and they make something called the Gold Digger and a Cherry Picker.
Yeah.
The Gold Digger is the mic switcher. The Cherry Picker is the preamp switcher.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is maybe you could get away with something less complicated with less analog channels if you were to just put all your pre's on the Cherry Picker and just choose the pre you want to use from the switch box.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be an alternative way to go.
Well, the good thing about this is why I like the Audient as well. It has the 4 inputs that I can use a DI in the back, which is great.
Yeah.
The monitor outs are great, so I don't have to have a monitor station anymore. So I pulled that out, the mix. It's got 2 headphone outputs, which is perfect. So I've got one for in here, and I've got an input into the booth. And it has a talkback, which you can allocate one of your mic channels and make that a talkback, which is really handy. So I've got...
That's nice.
Yeah. So the 4th preamp that I don't use, I've just made that the talkback. Probably the most expensive talkback preamp on the planet. But anyway, so everything, once we set it all up, and then, Richie actually set the loop back, because the problem is it's actually pre-fader when things are getting into your DAW. Yeah. So we made it post, so I can actually pull up a fader and I don't get all the other preamps bleeding in.
Oh, that's nice that you can do that.
Yeah.
That's just a little firmware setting, like a little control panel.
Yeah, so he just moves a few things around, and then he has talkback set up, so we can go from different headphones. So it could be a talkback into the headphones A or headphones B and all that kind of stuff, which is all good.
It's pretty flexible then, yeah.
So it's a great little unit. It doesn't take up a huge amount of space. It does everything I want except work.
Yeah, with great power
Yes.
comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
So this is why, while I've had a lot of reasons to whine and complain about Apollo stuff, on the whole, they have proven to be extremely rock solid.
Yeah.
Like I've installed many of these over the years, and have had very few of them fail. I would know. I would be like, a couple of years ago, there was a series of them that had an issue that crept up, and it was in the analog preamp section that caused sort of a white noise whooshing sound.
Yeah.
That was a bad batch. Like they clearly had a bad batch. But once they got through the batch, I have not heard that. I've not heard that again. It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
And overall, on the whole, it's been extremely rock solid. But to have the same level of compatibility, the functionality you're getting now, you would have to get the X4, I think it is. And that's going to be quite a bit more money. It's definitely over $1,000.
Yeah.
And you'd be getting a lot of features that you don't need either, right? You don't need all that DSP. You have the real thing. You have all those preamps.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't need a bunch of plug-in preamps, but that's the only reason I would even bring it up is I know that thing like the back of my hand. I know every single quirk of those things, and I know the track record of their stuff has been extremely good. So if you're shopping and you're down to one or two items, just if you're going to look at the RME at whatever it costs, look at the X4 the Apollo X4. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, it's like a twin, but it's 4 channels instead of...
It's a 4-channel, exactly. And just check that one out as it's just another alternative and see how that fits into your budget. Because if you had one of those, I would very, very much know how it all works and what it can do and how to make it all dance. So just putting that out there.
Interesting. I'll have a look at that one. But because I did look at the RME and, the X4. Wow, it could be a bit more expensive here than...
Probably.
Yeah, I'd say...
Is it in the $1,500 range?
I'm looking at Thunderbolt. Oh, that's the X4 Quad Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
We're talking $3,000 here in Australia.
Oh,
What's
smokes.
funny, Andrew, is that, okay, if you think about the setup that you're trying to achieve, what you're basically wanting to have is a mixer that feeds into your computer a bunch of different microphones.
Correct.
And right now the mixer is inside your computer, and he set it up post fader so that whatever fader you push up, that's the fader, that's the mic that's going in as your input for your
It
DAW.
feels like a regular mixer.
Okay.
Works like a broadcast board.
Exactly. So how different would it be if it was just like, you know what, I'm just going to get a clean mixer with a class compliant USB stereo interface. Done.
Like the SSL 6.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, George, does that make sense? Just like move the mixer into the real world. It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
It's a lot the same thing as far as the way he's...
Yeah, no matter what, the problem is because of our unique needs for what we do, you end up buying a lot because you need a few specific things, right?
Yeah.
Like you need the SSL 6, he just doesn't need most of what's going on, but it could be set up to do what he needs to do. But you end up spending so much money for things you don't need.
Yeah.
And the Apollo is the same situation. Like you end up spending a ton of money for all this DSP processing that you don't need.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like it's just a unique situation, and the RME seems to be the best suited based on everything.
So it doesn't have to be an SSL. It could just literally be. I mean, Mackie makes them with USB interfaces. There's all kinds of hardware mixers out there that have USB interfaces that are
multi-channel,
multi-channel even. Yeah,
but he doesn't need. You're right. He doesn't really need multi-channel.
Right, but
he just needs to really clean.
It could be like
he just needs to really clean A to D converter.
Yep.
And he needs a really nice monitor matrix for just choosing what he's listening to.
Yeah. And that's why the Audient ID44 seemed perfect.
Right.
And it still may be because I may have got a faulty one. If is it firmware or is it there's some fault inside the box somewhere?
There's so much of what those things do anymore is firmware.
They're just computers, really.
They're just computers. The only physical controls on that unit, and I believe they still have an actual gain trim pot, right?
Yeah.
Per channel.
Yep, correct.
That's it. Like literally everything else is software. The big knob is software controller. All the push buttons are assignable software. It's all software.
Yep.
And that's the pro and that's the con all at the same time.
Yeah.
There's just so much more that it's capable of doing at the risk of, having train wrecks occur.
Yeah. But based on everything I've said to you, though, with, Wavelab working, they're not working, they're getting clipping, they're not getting clipping, Twisted Wave working and then not working. Well, actually, Twisted Wave has worked till line. It hasn't let us down at all. Based on that information, where would you point the finger? Would you point at the ID44 and say it's a firmware issue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you said you were getting blasts of clipping distortion directly into your cans.
Yep.
That's internal. That's firmware. That's something losing clock and just losing its mind.
Yeah.
Like something is just freaking out.
So that being the case, would you say it's inherent with the ID44 or I've got a faulty box?
You might just have a faulty box. You might even get the original version and try that one instead. That had the older firmware. The only person I know that leans heavily on Audient and uses it in his daily day-to-day studio and has an ID44 is Mike Delgaudio, the booth junkie guy. He loves that ID4. He loves the ID44. He also uses the ADAT input and has another 8 channels of analog inputs, for other stuff that he uses one of those Audient 8-channel pre's.
Yep.
He loves it. But I also know that he's really good at dealing with and troubleshooting problems. So I don't know if he's had the issues and not told anybody, but it seems like if he did have issues, he probably would have done a YouTube about it by now.
I would have thought so, yeah.
To share everything that he deals with in his studio.
Yeah.
That's that. I don't know what that means, but I know he's using it. Another thing that you guys mentioned briefly in passing, but was Motu.
Yeah. Motu makes great stuff.
Is Motu readily available down there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they have the Motu, I just stumbled on this one, the Motu 624. And that just might be the Goldilocks device.
It's got a very comprehensive mixer. I'm pretty familiar with it because I had the ID like 144 or something. It was basically like 48 channels of AES, 48 channels of ADAT, 48 channels of something else.
Oh, the Motu?
Yeah, it was like
it's all digital.
It was a D112, 112 channels. But it's the same thing as like with what you were saying with Behringer. Like once you know the Motu interface, the way they do their mixer,
right?
You know their whole line. And it's in many ways the DSP power and the routing power is almost beyond what you can do with an Apollo, actually.
Well, the Motu I was looking at was the Motu Ultralight Mark V. That was
well, that could be really similar to the 624. I'm just looking at the rear panel of 624, and it gives you 4 TRS line ins, 4 TRS line outs, and main outs, and then 2 XLR mic ins, which you don't need necessarily, and then ADAT in and out for more channels, but. It seems like that's everything you need.
What's really needed, I still think like you have a bunch of microphones that you want to pick. You want to have 2 headphone outputs and you just want to record 1 mic at a time, maybe 2 at the most. So stereo in, stereo out of the computer. Why not just get all of this like selecting and mixing functions and stuff, get it out into hardware and then just go with a simple class compliant 2-in, 2-out USB interface.
Like a Mackie 1602, 1604 mixer?
Clean, brings nothing to it, takes nothing away from it mixer. Exactly.
I've built many studios around those mixers. I wouldn't say that they're up to this. I wouldn't say they're up to class for the other gear he's using, but I've never also known them to cause any real
the line inputs are
either.
fine. I mean, I agree the mic preamps are not like the most amazing, but
right.
Going line into a Mackie isn't going to destroy your signal necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see one that's like, because you have 4 mic preamps, but the thing that's interesting is that you do like and would like to have a talkback feature, and I agree that's a nice thing to have if you have a booth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's an example. So last night, I had to do it, but Somerset was booked for a job at a radio station in Perth. So all they wanted to do was use Source Connect Now to monitor, and then I captured the audio. But I couldn't trust the ID44 or the new Mac. Yeah. So I went onto the laptop and used the SSL, which was fine, but it meant I couldn't hear anything because there was only one headphone out, and that was Somerset's.
Right.
The SSL2 Plus, you would have 2 headphones.
Yeah.
It's like you didn't think you were going to need
I'm
that.
I'm thinking about an Allen and Heath. George, what do you think?
Yeah.
Some Allen and Heath with a
series?
USB.
The Zeds?
Like an 8-channel. I'm trying to see what they have, but like an 8-channel Allen and Heath
series.
Stereo USB.
They're pretty low quality power supplies, pretty low quality.
Yeah.
Box.
Really?
The Z series. Yeah, they're not very high fidelity. But if you go up
to me, it's the RME has rock solid converters. That's the thing about RME. And that's why, you buy the thing, you pay, a premium, but you know what you're getting. You're getting something that's not going to do what the audience is doing to me right now.
Right.
So,
There's also I already talked about it, and its price range. It's the SSL 6, literally called the 6, would be amazing.
Yeah.
But it's going to be way north of $2,000 because you're paying so much.
That's like $1,200, right?
No, I'm talking about Australian dollars. In the US, the thing is, what does it cost? In the US, it's $1,800.
Yeah, it's like so expensive.
So you're paying a lot of money for that mic preamp, the super analog preamp, the whole full blown channel strip.
Yeah, and he already has preamps. That's not he needs just like a line mix.
I know. I put one in a studio for exactly the same reason you are, like the same thing you're doing, right? For Howard Parker. And it was just after we replaced his Mackie mixer 5 times in 15 years or 18 years, I was like, all right, do you want to put another Mackie in 5 years? Or do you want to just blow a big wad of money on this thing and just not have to replace it for a lot longer? And you said, all right, let's do it. It was quite an investment.
Yeah.
But the sealed pots and the switches, everything on it, the sealed pots and switches, everything is not going to give you trouble for many, many years. And that's where, like a Mackie mixer, while it works great, the pots and the switches get dirty over time. Yeah. And you cannot clean them really. There's nothing you can really do. So that's where, really at a certain point, you're now talking about literally a broadcast console, right? That's the next level. Is something that's designed broadcast quality, which is designed to be running 24/7. And
how much did the Audient cost?
In Australian dollars was 1,100. So I'm thinking about 750, 800 US.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the SSL 6 is like $800.
It's twice that.
No, it's more than that. Here it's
twice that.
No.
Yeah, it's
there's
like
one on Reverb for
2,000.
$600.
Yeah, 2,000 Australian, so that'll be about 1,500 US, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, what we're looking for is simplicity.
Yeah,
and
which the
and
audience
I think
has.
that to me, that's why I keep on going over towards the analog mixer setup instead of the digital, firmware mixer built into the computer kind of thing.
I don't disagree with you, but to keep the signal path as pristine as it needs to be and should be, to equate what you would get doing it digitally inside the ID 14, 44, or any of the digital mixers, it's got to be a pretty high-end piece of gear, I think. It's got to be at that kind of class. The SSL is in its own class. There's just not much out there in a compact analog board that doesn't end up adding a gajillion, knobs, and before you know it, it's out of control.
Well, in a way that the knobs aren't the problem. That's just all more flexibility.
Yeah,
but you're right. No one really makes, like SSL's got one. They Mackie, not really. I agree. They're definitely on like the budget side of things in a way.
Right.
So,
and I would never trust a PreSonus. I've had so many people with PreSonus stuff fail.
I'm not thinking
power
PreSonus
supplies and stuff.
I'm surprised Allen and Heath is that bad. What about who like Ward Beck? Do they make anything like really good? Yeah.
If you go up the food chain at Allen and Heath, you're going to get some really high end gear. Right? But at the base level,
So
at the
how about
size
this
that you
idea,
need,
George?
they're just they're cheesy in those small consoles.
George, how about this idea? What's the best simple stereo in, stereo out interface you can think of? No frills,
Best
no
quality,
driver.
simple.
Yeah, like a sound
Without mic
devices
preamps?
or
With no mic preamps.
it
Just
does
line
not
in,
have to
line
have
out.
mic preamps. But I mean, we're not buying it for the mic preamps.
No,
We're
I
just
know.
buying it for it's like a yellow tech, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, Yellowtech's going to be $1,000.
Yeah.
At least for just 2 in, 2 out. I have one of those things, by the way. It's just it's an unserved market niche. It just nobody's making
Yeah,
it.
true.
It just aren't.
Yeah.
Everything's going digital because it's cheaper to make. It's cheaper to upgrade. It's possible to upgrade. And you sell it on channels and bells and whistles, right? Analog pure circuit switchers and matrix mixers and monitor mixers are not those aren't big sellers. It's the digital whiz bang stuff that's selling. That's what's being developed.
Yeah.
At least in this compact kind of home studio kind of situation.
I'm really surprised at the Allen and Heath stuff. You really think it's not good stuff?
Well, I mean, are you talking about the Z series? Because the Z series
I don't
is
know
not.
their line as well. I never really associated. I kind of put Allen and Heath and Mackie in the same light. Like I don't think of
so
Allen
their
and Heath
Z
as
stuff
Behringer.
is their Mackie stuff.
Okay.
Like that, the Z is designed to compete with Mackie Onyx, not Onyx, the original VLZs.
Right.
The classic Mackie VLZs. Those are the Zs, right? But the next thing up from Z, you're getting into a much bigger jump in price, and then everything else after that's digital. Like you before you know it, it's just an all digital console. So it's hard. The Goldilocks mixers are very few and far between anymore. I installed a Tascam mixer called a Model 8. Yeah, Model 8 for Chris Fry's. That's a $700 mixer. Again, full of features you don't need. It's a multi-track recorder built in, right? It's like a Porta Studio.
Right, yeah. It's that Tascam one. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
But it's a cut above in terms of how it's built. Actual construction of the unit, the switches and pots. It definitely is a cut above a Mackie. So
That's
when I
interesting
bought it
because
for him, I was like,
I don't know that Tascam was always above a Mackie. I mean, there's many times I've thought of Tascam products being below Mackie.
But this board, I bought it and installed it, and I was incredibly impressed with the feel of it and the signal flow, the flexibility, and all of that, and still at a reasonable price and not that physically huge. Plus, all the I/O is on the rear panel instead of on the top, which makes it a lot cleaner on your desk. Yeah, that made it, to me, the sweet spot. Once again, features you don't need, but it seemed to be filling that hole between the base Mackies and Behringers and Yamaha mixers that are out there and the much more expensive large frame. This seemed like a middle ground kind of thing.
Well, I shall investigate further, and I'm guessing in episodes to come, we will find out which way I went.
I think maybe an interesting thing to check out would be to look at a really nice classic analog mixer and just get a simple interface for it. Just a simple.
He's going to be spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
He's going to spend way more than like an RME.
Yeah, I know, but it would have a certain does exactly what it does. No drivers, no nothing. The next computer you get,
Andrew,
you just plug it right
Andrew,
in.
here's what you're going to get. Get the RME Babyface FS or whatever the new one is, and then get a cherry picker for switching between your preamps, and you're done.
We suggested that too. Yeah.
That's the best I can do.
Basically the same thing. It's like use a big mixer but does the Babyface have a talkback feature on it?
Yeah. Well, the Fireface doesn't either. So this,
and that is a nice thing.
It's very
You're killing me,
nice.
RME.
I've got a feeling that I've got a faulty ID44.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. But we shall investigate further. I'll get Richie to have a
Yes,
look and
sir.
see what we...
There's another brand we haven't even talked about, and that is, I guess, for another episode.
Focusrite?
Because I can't remember what they're called. It's a German. I think it's a German brand.
I'm
Dang it,
I know what
George.
you're talking about. It's Lynx.
You had a headphone. No, you had a headphone monitor controller thing from them that you said actually was bad. Do you remember that thing?
No.
You had? Didn't you have a monitor controller and it ended up being a bum?
Yeah. SPL.
SPL.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. SPL makes the Sapphire or something like that, right?
Yeah, they make a couple of USB interfaces. Just another brand to consider. Maybe you've had because you had the bad unit, you may not want to go there. But they make one called the Crimson, which is
the
pretty
Crimson,
nice.
that's what it was. Not Sapphire, but Crimson, right?
Yeah.
Or you could go for the merging technologies.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what's cool about the Crimson, actually, is it has enough I.O., but it's still...
I know which one.
It's a 6 in, 6 out, right? So it gives you all the I.O. you need, Andrew, and it's got TalkBack, and it's got a lot of monitoring flexibility, and it's got that monitor matrix monitor thing, which you don't really need, but it's built in. And what else? Yeah, it lets you have 4 line ins connected to it, and then you switch from the front panel which ones of those you're actually listening to, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it has a gold digger built in. Like because you can just say, well, you're not recording all 6 channels, you're just recording 2, and you're choosing which ones you're going to record.
Yeah.
George, I
or
got an
listen
idea.
to.
That's actually a really good idea.
Okay.
The SPL.
How about an old, like,
You can tell where we're going here. How about
no, like, okay, get a really good A to D converter, basically. Get a really good one, like a Lucid ADDA, okay? And then use that with, I mean, whatever mixer is good and now a little bit more modern and flexible, because now we could, with a good A to D, D to A, we could jump to any digital mixer that has, USB on it. And now there's a ton more of those.
Yeah.
And then it's back to the hardware.
I've got to say, though, looking at the SPL Crimson,
It checks all the boxes,
It checks all
I
the
think.
boxes, and it's not anywhere near as expensive as the RME.
Yeah.
Could be worth a look.
I know precious few that have SPL stuff. I know somebody with the Creon, which is the lighter version.
Yep.
The smaller one, and he loves it.
Yeah.
The Creon.
It looks really schmick as well. I'm there.
What does
Just
Antelope
try it.
make? That would be...
Antelope.
I have my opinion about them is it's extremely high on the gimmick level and like really, really interesting capabilities, but hard to use, and service-wise, you're dealing with Hungary,
Right.
the country. So maybe not the greatest. That concerns me a little bit, to be honest. But I'm so tempted because they keep coming out with new stuff. And I'm like, oh man, that looks cool. They do make some really cool stuff. And even Lewitt, the microphone company, they just launched an interface called Connect 6. And it's wacky looking. But the mixer console, the console it comes with is really slick. It's got really good routing capability. Like it takes my Revelator that I'm always, gushing about, and just does even more. And it's a really nice piece. And it's got channel strips and, stuff you don't need, but it's got an expander, a compressor, and an EQ on every channel, input channel. It's pretty slick.
In software or
I would buy that thing in hardware on board. Like it's DSP, it's DSP. Everything's going to DSP.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's going DSP. 133 dB VEIN, 72 dB of gain on the preamps. These are pretty impressive numbers. But again, for your needs, I don't know. It's very bleeding edge. It's very new. I think Creon. I think you can get Creon from a local vendor. I would grab one of those and just throw everything at it and see what happens. Just see if you like it.
Yeah.
Do it for us. Do it for us, Andrew.
Take one for the boys.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite
With thanks to Tribooth.
and Austrian Audio. Recorded using Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging.
With tech support from George the Tech Whittam.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website,
theproaudiosuite.com.